I think we sang too long in our hymn sing, and I don't think I want to eliminate the meditation, but I'm going to cut it as short as I can. I do want to say something to you, though, about the tradition of music in the church and how it started back in the Old Testament time. A man by the name of Jubal, who was seventh generation removed from Adam and Eve. He was the first musician. And if you look back over the history of the world, I think you will find that it's the Old Testament Jewish tradition and then the New Testament that has really given the world its music. But music played an important part in the development of the church. And the instruments that were used in the Old Testament became the beginnings of what happened much later on. It's interesting to know that the lyre was the first instrument, called the kinnor it was called originally. And this was the instrument that they hung on the willows in the Babylonian captivity because they were so sad. For you see, the lyre was the music of joy, and music always represented joy in the faith. And when the prophets wanted to tell the people that God was displeased, they threatened to take the lyre away, the instrument of joy, because God was unhappy with their sins. And this was part of the way in which God would speak to them. Remove the music. For music represented the expressions of the joy of their heart. When the temple was built, the first original large temple, out of 30,000 Levites, 4,000 singers were chosen. It was so important that these singers were put on the payroll. How would you like that? And Ezekiel tells us that when they came to build the temple courts, they gave the choir the southern exposure of sunshine and light and brightness, because the choir was the group that brought the sunlight and the joy into worship service. And I like to think of the same thing today. It's the choir that lifts the spirit and expresses our thoughts. And through the choir, we obtain this kind of joy. Think of it. Divided the choir in two, 2,000 singers, 1,000 in the back, 1,000 in the front, two shifts, so to speak, 120 trumpets. That would give you some brass. And that's the way they sang. And the expression of music in that New Testament, in that Old Testament church was beautiful, the old temple worship. Of course, when they built the second temple, it was small. And then they had a very limited number of singers, and they missed much of that dynamic. Well, through the years, we were told to sing. And so you find in the New Testament, in Colossians 3:16, for example, it says, "Teach and admonish in all wisdom as you sing psalms and hymns." For it was the music that was expressive of the faith. And if you track a little history of the church, won't bother you with much tonight, there were two major conflicts in the early church. The Gnostics, who denied the humanity of Jesus, were fought by composers who wrote hymns for the church that spoke of the deity of Christ. And they got the people to sing it. Well, then the Gnostics got people singing about his non-humanity as though he was all deity, and simply appeared in a human form and then left again. No longer a real person, a human divine being. And then it swung around the other way. And in the days of Arius, there was the conflict of those who believed, who did not believe in the humanity of Christ, who believed rather in the deity and desired only the deity of Christ. Finally, the battle was joined by Chrysostom in Constantinople, where the Arian controversy was brought to a head and where the deity of Christ was reestablished. Gregory, one of the great composers, is still found in hymn books today. A song like "O Light That Knew No Dawn" was written in that controversy way back in the early centuries of the church. And let me tell you how important music was. I discovered in looking through some of this the last couple of days that St. Augustine was greatly influenced by music. He went to Milan, you remember, and Ambrose the lawyer turned lay preacher and then made a bishop. Was the one who preached but also wrote hymns. And his music was so effective in speaking of the deity and the humanity of Jesus. For that's the period of the church when that doctrine of the two natures of Christ was developed. This was the time of singing, and this is what we find in the Confessions of St. Augustine. What tears I shed over the hymns and canticles when the sweet sound of music of thy church thrilled my soul. As the music flowed into my ears, and thy truth trickled into my heart. The tide of devotion swelled high within me, and the tears ran down. And there was gladness in those tears. Never think that music is not important, germane to the whole movement of God through history. And we are the people of music. And if you've noticed, the hymns we've been singing are freighted with doctrine, teachings of the Scripture. They tell the whole story. We can find hymns to express off almost every mood that we have and every desire that we have. Think about the joy of the music of the church. Appreciate the choir and the instruments in a new dimension as you share together not only the Word, but the Word through music, which come to us with such dynamic and such meaning.